All right. My name is Marcellus Pelcher. I work at Google as a software engineer, but the things that I say here is my own. So the opinions that I express here are not Google's. I just wanted to get that out of the way. I'm a software developer, and when I saw people coming out with smart speakers, I had to jump on because this is like a dream come true for me, because I remember seeing on television sci-fi where the characters were talking to computers. And I'm like, I want to build that someday, and now we're able to do that. So these are some of the apps that I built externally. And all of this is open source, except for one, but I'm working on getting that open source. So if you want to look at them and take some code away, that's fine. So I wanted to talk about today is voice user interface. Let's step back for a little bit and go back to the ENIAC days where computers filled rooms. With this interface, it was very crude. They had knobs and switches and lights and so forth to interact with computers. So fast forward a little bit, you had a little bit more improvement. This is the Teletype, where you are using your hands to type to the computer and looking at the paper to understand what is going on with the computer. But one thing I want to point out is that you're using your hands for output and your eyes for input. So this is something that we probably see now in a modern desktop. Still, things hasn't really changed that much, even though you may have a high-res screen, you have a fancy keyboard or whatever, or a touch screen. But you're still using your hands for output and eyes for input. This changes the game. So with voice as an interface, especially when it's by itself, you are interacting with the computer with your mouth. So you're using your mouth as an output and your ears as an input. And sometimes people instinctively don't really get the switch and the paradigm shift here, but the paradigm shift is huge, and you have to appreciate, the things that it offers or the things that it doesn't do because of that paradigm shift. You are using your different body parts to interact with the computer. So today I'm going to talk about creating interactions for voice interfaces, and so the main thing I'm going to talk about is choosing a persona, keeping it short and simple, and learning through role play. So personas. As people earlier said today, with voice, it has a distinct quality of just by hearing a voice, you can tell, that's a male or female. You can tell the age, and you can tell, if it's somebody from New York or Texas. So having that, expressiveness, as a designer or as a builder, we need to control those things, unless if you don't control it, somebody else will. They'll just make up things. It's important to choose a persona also because, one voice sounds different from the other. So example given, like the game show host. He sounds a whole lot different from a teacher, and a teacher is different from a lawyer. So, using those levers, you can have, different, expressiveness with just the voice. And with text, it's not as difficult to, things you have to worry about. So one of the things that you have to remember with voice is that keep it conversational. A lot of times people, write very well, right? But when it comes to voice, if you translate that same text and have a computer to speak it out or have your voice actor to speak it out, it will not sound as well. So one of the things is that sometimes people don't want to use, contractions. So one designer was trying to get their client to use contractions, and this is what they say is, we can't use contractions in our communications. And the designer was like, you just used one there. So the thing is that don't be too formal with the communication when you're writing dialogue versus writing text. Keep it short and simple. So with voice, it is a stream versus like a puddle. So what I mean by that is you hear only one word at a time. So it's not a puddle where you can just go back and forth and easily, skim. So something like a bank statement is something that you don't want to necessarily force through a VUI. And a lot of times people take the primitives that they see in the visual world and try to make it in the voice world. So also keep it short and sweet. A lot of times I see people develop applications, voice applications, try to give all of the instructions to the voice app in the beginning. And it's like a long, drawn-out, conversation. And sometimes users don't know how to stop it, so they have to sit through this long conversation. So it's better to keep it short, where it's going back and forth. Also, keep it simple. Something like super duper hard math is something that you probably don't want to do, especially if your users are, riding a bicycle, driving a car, or something else. They're using their other senses that are now freed up, which are their hands and eyes, to do something else. So, be, conscious of this. So this is probably something that you don't want to do. Role play. So if you don't, use any of the stuff that I talked about today, think about at least using this, because before you create a bot and load it up and test it out with a human being, right? And by doing this, you can see a few things. You can hear, the flow of the conversation, and you can also get feedback from the individual to say, hey, is this a, good voice app or not? Because maybe you don't even need to build that application. Another thing is when you do this, before you build the bot, you can find the errors early. And when you find the errors early, you can then change it much easily than if you had it, later on in the design process. That's it for me. The main thing is that understanding that voice is different from the previous interfaces, and have an appreciation for voice. It's not going to replace, the previous interfaces, but it is different. And you can connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Medium. Thank you.
Do you want to take some questions? Or?
Sure.
I think we have time for one question.
Anybody?
Oh, there's one right here. It's mic 4.
Wow, that's me. So as you think about the emergence of more multimodal surfaces and how that's coming up, what are you thinking as far as like future voice trends and how that's going to change the landscape?
Yeah, so I think that multimodal is a thing and will happen, where you walk into your house and you probably will have a wall screen, but I still feel that you should develop voice first, where I don't have to look at the screen in order to operate it. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.